Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this webinar today. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We'll wait for a few of the latecomers to come on board. Just a couple of notes, and I will mention this again towards the end. There's a questions box. It'll be on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any questions, please post them there. We'll have some time at the end to answer those questions. So hang on just a couple minutes, and we'll get started.
All right, we still have a couple people trickling in, but we'll go ahead and get started. First off, thank you all for joining us today. I'm Leroy Bridges, Vice President of Digital and Communications with Visit St. Pete Clearwater. Wanted to welcome you all to the first part of this Google DMO partnership that we're participating in with Miles Partnership, who is our longtime digital agency. C.A. Clark, the Vice President of Digital Marketing at Miles, will be jumping on and leading the ship momentarily. I just wanted to underscore a couple things before that. Obviously, Google is at the core of any business, so I'm really excited about what you're going to hear today, and hopefully all of you find it valuable. I did want to emphasize the second part of this webinar. This is kind of a two-piece. The second part is a 2-hour in-person workshop that will build onto what is covered today. Mark your calendars. We have 6 different times across 2 days and 2 venues, making it easy for you to attend. The first date is February 12th. They're going to be held here at our offices at Visit St. Pete Clearwater. The time blocks, and again, CA will cover this, and it is on our partner site, but just wanted to emphasize it. 10 to noon, 1:30 to 3:30, and 4 to 6 p.m. Again, you only need to attend one of those 2-hour sessions, and really it'll continue to dive deeper into what you're going to hear today. The second date is the next day, February 13th, and that will be downtown St. Pete at the Vinoy. Same times, 10 to noon, 1:30 to 3:30, 4 to 6 p.m. So hopefully you can build on this and attend those in-person workshops with us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to C.A. Clark, again, Vice President of Digital Marketing at Miles. C.A., go ahead, take it away.
Thanks, Leroy. All right, we'll get started here. Just as a little bit of an overview, this is a program that over the last probably 18 months, Miles has helped over 75 different destination clients participate in. We'll talk a little bit more about what that program is, but just to give you an idea of the kind of the scope of what we've done here. The base part of this is a program which Google calls the DMO Partnership, and it is essentially a set of tools that Google provides for destinations to help improve the quality and the quantity of the information that is available in all of their products. And those are a bunch of things that we'll be looking at today. So St. Pete Clearwater is a participant in that, and Miles has a support program that helps those destinations kind of understand how best to maximize those tools. The overall goal of that program is to understand how people search for the area when they're planning a trip, and then what they see when they do. So there's kind of those two components to it. What are the kinds of things, the search terms that people use, and then when they use those, what sorts of things do they find? And that's a really important component of the program, because sometimes we find things in that process that look really great. Sometimes we find really beautiful pictures, we find nice, complete information, we find good ratings, we find all of those things when we look, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes we find things that are a little weird. This is not a picture from St. Pete Clearwater, mind you, but it is one of our favorite pictures from this program. This was the cover photo for a park in somewhere in the South, in Tennessee, I think. So sometimes when we look at these products, we don't really think about how people might be experiencing our destination or our businesses and all of the different ways that they experience that. And so we're not necessarily aware of some of the things that are happening inside these products. And that's a lot of what the goal of this program is. One of the most important components of the program that we provide, that Miles provides for the destinations, is industry education. And that is the first part of which is today's webinar. And then, as Leroy mentioned, there will be a number of follow-up workshops which will have more in-depth tactical instruction. We have a little bit more time to go through some best practices and provide some templates and things. And I'll point out some of those things that you might expect as we go through. And then again, at the end, I do have a slide that lists all of the times and the locations and the dates and so forth, so you can capture those later on. Okay, what we want to do is help you maximize and optimize your exposure in Google's products, because it benefits your business. It also benefits the visitor, and then by extension, it benefits the destination. So it's a win-win-win, if you will, when you get more exposure, when you are optimized for your individual businesses. That works for everyone in this in the planning chain. Okay, so a lot of what we're going to talk about today will be about your business listing or your knowledge panel, and you'll hear me reference that a couple of different times. So when I talk about the knowledge panel, that's what shows up on the right-hand side of a desktop search, where it has all of the information about your business. The thing with the knowledge panel is that there are dozens of different products, and we're going to look at what those products are, a little bit of an overview in a minute. The knowledge panel looks different in almost every one of those products. So it's different, has different size and shapes and colors, and shows up in different ways. But the good news is that all of those, even though the products are showing those a little bit differently, all of those are driven off the same information. And so that certainly makes it handy for you as individual business owners and operators to keep that stuff updated, because you can pretty much be guaranteed that whatever product Google introduces tomorrow or the next day is going to leverage the information that you already have in there. Also makes it increasingly important that you have that information correct. Okay, so the knowledge panel and the information that Google knows about your business, how accurate that is and how much of that information they know, is important to your business for three key reasons that I'm going to go through. Okay, the first of those three reasons is that your knowledge panel and your business listing information is an enormous source of exposure for your business. And in many cases, it is the largest source of exposure for your business. Obviously, there are caveats to that depending on what you're paying for pay-per-click and how you're involved in search engine optimization and all kinds of other stuff. But for a lot of businesses, this is the single largest component of organic exposure that your business is going to get. Partially, that's because it's a much larger amount of screen space. So if we look for an individual listing, you can see in red there's a link to the website, that organic link to whatever the website is for that business. But it's pretty tiny compared to the size of the knowledge panel. And especially when we get into some of these other products, you'll see how that knowledge panel in some ways kind of pushes some of the other results out of the way. So partially, it's a much larger amount of screen space. Partially, it's a much higher volume of exposure. So this is looking at this was a restaurant. And so the restaurant for 1 quarter, 90 days had about 15,000 page views on the site, on their own website. And let's figure there was, something 2.5 pages per view there, or 2 pages per visitor rather. Let's figure looking at something like 7,000 or 8,000 visitors who came to that website. But during that same time frame, you had 30,000 times that business's information was surfaced in search. And that number gets even bigger when we start to look at other components of the various platforms here. So this is now taking into account both search, exposures in search and in maps. And suddenly we go from 30,000 to 104,000. So now we have over 100,000 exposures for that business's information versus something like 8,000 people who came to the website. And I'm not saying that those two things are the same, that someone coming to your website is worth the same as someone seeing your business information, in a map search or doing some other kind of search in one of Google's products. But I'm telling you that at 13x, and sometimes that number is quite a bit higher, if you're going to spend an hour thinking about how people experience your website and making sure that that is up to date, definitely worth spending an hour thinking about how you're represented in all of these other products in Google's ecosystem. Okay, one of the other things to keep in mind, and we do reiterate this a little bit in the workshop, we talk a little bit more about the value of a completed listing, but having a completed listing inside the Google's products has a whole bunch of different benefits. One of them is that you are 7 times more likely to generate a click if your listing is complete. And I'll go through this a little bit later. The completed listings, like the check for completed listings, is pretty minimal. There's not a ton of things that you have to fill out in order to be completed. They are almost 3 times as likely to be considered reputable, and that's a really important thing to think about when somebody is making a decision between going to your business or your competitor or down the street or in a different part of town. The idea that you can increase your chances of someone choosing your business just by having that completed information is pretty important. And then completed listings are 70% more likely to generate an actual visit to your location. So all good reasons to make sure that your business listing information is all up to date. And we'll come back to that a little bit at the end and talk about kind of a little checklist that you can go through just to make sure that you have all of your bases covered there. So that's the first reason that your business information is important. Okay, the first one is that it's an enormous amount of exposure, and the second one is that the information about your business gets used in a whole bunch of different places, and probably a lot of places that you didn't necessarily think about. So we'll do kind of a quick tour here of some of the places that Google is surfacing your business information right now. And this is certainly not an exhaustive list. There's all kinds of products that are happening all the time. We've seen actually a lot of volatility just in the beginning part of the year here with products changing. You may have noticed that if you log into Google My Business, there's some changes there, or use Docs or travel guides or any of those other things. Just in the last couple of weeks, been quite a lot of changes there. So first example is the most obvious one, which is a search engine result page and what we call the local 3-pack. And the 3-pack is the result of a keyword and a place, or some number of keywords in a place. So in this case, it's restaurants in St. Pete Beach, and it produces those 3 results, sometimes 4, but typically 3 with a little map in there. And if you can get in the 3-pack, that's the largest opportunity for qualified organic customer leads that you're going to get. Obviously, there's a lot of competition for those 3 spots, and in the workshop, we do talk a little bit about what drives the algorithmic selection of those. Certainly no guarantees there, but do have a little bit of insight as to how that works. So the 3-pack, if you were in there, definitely a great source of organic exposure. But there's all kinds of other things that we see where certain business types will get increased exposure. And this is one that we have seen grow quite a lot in 2018, which is called top sites. So sometimes it's labeled things to do, as it is here. And this is a block. This is a generated block that pulls into the search engine results page based on roughly 26 different keyword triggers. And they are, things to do and top sites and places to go and what to do and those kinds of keywords plus a place. And what it does is generate this little list, the block of 4 here. And those businesses are limited to certain types. So they're primarily attractions. They are outdoor kinds of things, parks and natural resources, things like that. But there's also a number of business types in there, like museums. Sometimes you'll get like a theme park or things like that will come into there. So no restaurants, no hotels, although there are other exposures which we'll look at for those business types. So if you are one of those, like the Clearwater Marine Aquarium or a museum of some type, this can be a huge source of exposure for those business types. Top sites then clicks through to a broader list. So you have those first 4 that show up in there for all those 26 searches. And then if you click through to that, you'll get a list of 50 for the destination. You'll also have a bunch of different sub-destinations, depending on whether you use St. Petersburg or Clearwater or Gulfport or whatever in your search term. You'll get a slightly different set of top sites. So quite a lot of opportunity there for those business types. And then travel guides, if you haven't looked at this before, so if you just search for the name of a destination, you'll see the knowledge panel, this time shown on the left-hand side here, but you'll see the knowledge panel. And then if you click on the little block that says Clearwater Travel Guide, it will take you through to the travel guide for that destination. And this is all programmatic information that Google has pulled from a whole bunch of different places, your business listings included. But lots of other places contributed photos and maps and location data, articles and videos and all sorts of other things get pulled into the travel guide that are being increasingly exposed inside Google's products. So if you haven't seen the travel guide already, definitely take a look at that and you will see that it starts to get recommended more and more. We've actually seen some A/B tests with different buttons on there that are a little more visual than that one with the little gray compass icon. So a lot of effort going into the travel guides. This is one of those things that just changed in the last couple of days. In fact, changed a little bit of the format. So for hotel types, and this is actually part of the travel guide, you can get to the hotel finder through the travel guide if you go into the plan a trip part, and you can click through to hotels and it will give you a little bit of preview and then it'll go to the hotel finder. This is another area that if you haven't looked at this in a couple of months, there have been some tremendous improvements in the way that the hotel finder works and just kind of the quality of the content that is in there and the quality of the interface. So there's a lot of effort on Google's end of things here going into improving the hotel finder. And we predict that this will be an increasingly important component for hotels as this product continues to get pushed in all kinds of different places. So definitely worth checking out if you haven't taken a look at that in a while. There's a lot of really interesting kind of interactions that are happening inside the hotel finder and the way that the search works and the prices are surfaced and all of that stuff. Again, all being driven off the same information coming out of your business listing. Then we have some other ancillary travel tools like the Trips app. And the Trips app has kind of waxed and waned over the last probably 18 months. So it kind of comes and goes as it gets improvements. It is a really nice little travel app if you haven't used it. Really easy to download that. You can check out your destination. The idea is that the Trips app is meant to collect all of your reservations. So if I have a reservation to go somewhere in the next couple of weeks and Gmail is my email, right, then all of those reservations get pulled in there, and then the Trips app knows that I'm going to Phoenix or wherever it is, Tampa or St. Pete, and pulls those into the Trips app and kind of preloads some of that stuff for me. So if you go take a look at that, you can see things to do, There's actually restaurants. It's a little bit more tactical because it's a lower funnel kind of a tool where it presumes you've already made a decision about where you're going, but definitely can be really important for your individual businesses, especially in those kind of things to do type category or dining as well. So just some examples there of kind of how the Trips app is put together. Google Assistant is another one of these cases where using the same information in a lot of different ways. And as you, I'm sure, have noticed from the excessive advertising about it, especially over the holidays, there's a lot of effort that's going into expanding the devices that Google Assistant supports and how it is being used. So we're going from something like a speaker, which definitely has some limitations, but is still using your same business information to produce results, into things like the Google Home Hub that has a screen on it. There's some other smart screen devices. And then, of course, on your phone, you can use that. And we'll look at a couple of different examples of that. But the Google Assistant allows you to search for, discover, learn about, and even in some cases, like the example here where the Museum of Modern Art has an interior tour, you can actually walk around inside that business without ever leaving the Google Assistant app. And that's a pretty interesting kind of side road here of Google's overall products, because this is your same business information, but they're experiencing it in a way that is kind of largely opaque to you. You're not really thinking about that. You're looking at web results and you're looking at search results and things like that, and not really thinking about all the other ways that people can interact with that information through the Google Assistant. So we expect that there's a lot of effort being put into this. Here's another area that will be increasingly important to travel planning in the coming months. And then just a couple other examples, and then I'll kind of switch gears back into maps and some of the other stuff. A couple other interesting examples. If you haven't played with Google Lens, there's some really interesting things that are going on with image recognition, and there's a massive API and algorithm that Google has put together to recognize photos and objects and all kinds of stuff. If you've played with that on your own phone in the Photos app, you can search for cats or dogs or my friends or things like that. But this is an example where Lens can take an image and it can identify where that is. So we have this image of the Dali Museum, and then by using Lens, we can identify that. And it goes, oh, yeah, that's the Dali Museum. So there's some of those that are pretty interesting little interactions. The one that I found really interesting, and this is something that I took here locally, is you can take a picture of things like food. And this would work for museums as well. But this is really interesting. You're taking a picture of food here, and then you're using Google Lens, and it identifies not only what kind of food that is, but where you could eat it. And so there's some really interesting kind of interactions that I think will happen in the future here with Google Lens, where I'm looking for a pizza, and I can interact with it in this way that says, hey, that pizza is available right down the street here. So definitely some interesting things going on there. Google Street View is another source of exposure. So this is part of Maps, and it gets integrated with Maps, but it's also its own kind of ecosystem, the way that the 360 images work. And that's just an example here of kind of searching around St. Petersburg and then being able to flip through some of the pictures and then kind of zoom into a spot and be able to turn around and look at what it looks like in that particular spot. So a whole other kind of entry point for your business information. And then, of course, we have Maps. And I think traditionally we tend to think about Maps as kind of a wayfinding tool where people are trying to figure out how to get from one place to another, and not so much a discovery tool or a decision-making tool. But increasingly, Maps, especially for travelers, are critically important to those kinds of decisions. And so this is a really high exposure point for your business as people are kind of browsing around. They're trying to figure out how far away things are, what's nearby, if they're going to be in this area, what sort of things are there. And that can be a really important way of getting people into your business, particularly when you've got good coverage there. Google Earth, another one of the tools that has been updated pretty substantially just in the last couple of months. So if you haven't checked out that in a long time, definitely take a look at that. You'll see these little cards, the little knowledge cards that are coming into play here. So as you do a search, you'll have the card up in the corner, and then you can do a search for types of businesses, And you'll see this is all that same information that is formatted in a slightly different way. It shows up on the left-hand side. The interesting part here is if you actually click through to one of those listings, you get this full page instead of that knowledge panel. Like that knowledge panel on the right-hand side with this sort of narrow format to it and the tiny pictures. In Google Earth, it's taking that same information and formatting it as if it's this huge page. So another interesting thing to take a look at, go look up your business in Google Earth and see what kinds of things are being featured in there. Here in this case, this probably isn't the best photo to represent the museum. And so that would be a thing to be aware of, right? Like you would want to know how your business is being represented there. And then, of course, we have other ancillary products that use that same information. So Waze is one of those examples, owned by Google at this point, of course, but not fully integrated with Maps. So they still have two kind of separate ecosystems that exist there. But your business information still gets pulled into Waze. So even people who are using that are going to end up with that same information. And that doesn't even count. I mean, those are just kind of the obvious ones. That doesn't even count the thousands of other people who are using the Maps API to build various different products. And that could be, you know, Harley Davidson road trip app. It could be a car rental or insurance company or all kinds of different things. And they have obviously more control over what's in there, and they sometimes preference different types of information. But the base of that is all going to be the same information coming from your business listing in Google My Business, which we'll take a look at here in a second. So that's the second one. And the third reason that this is important to your business is that a lot of the information about your business isn't coming from you. In fact, the bulk of it is not coming from you. It's coming from contributions from your customers. And that has a pretty interesting effect on the overall perception of your business, how people see it, how they experience it, what kinds of decisions they make about your business, when 80% of the information they're getting about it is coming from customers and not coming from the owners. So the main source of that is called the Local Guides program, and that is a crowdsourced program that the Google Maps team put together a couple of years ago to try to drive content into Maps. And it's one of the critical differentiators between Google Maps and other map platforms is the enormous number of contributors for Google Maps. So anyone who has the Maps app on their phone, Google Maps app on their phone, and we all do, can contribute photos and information. I'm sure you've seen that come up when you take a picture and it'll suggest that you add it. I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. There are over 50 million local guides worldwide. That number is actually from the summit, the Local Guides Summit last year. So that number is probably something like 70 million local guides right now. And they average about 700,000 places added per month. And of course, that doesn't even count the number of times that something is updated or a photo is added or a video or something is corrected, things like that are coming into your business listing. So you've probably noticed if you logged into Google My Business that it will tell you that you have updates. And in a lot of cases, those updates are driven by local guides. In other cases, they're driven by the indexer, by algorithmic identification of business information. And we do have a little bit more of that in the workshop where we kind of dive into name, address, and phone consistency, and kind of how some of those things drive the information for your business listing algorithmically. This is an example, though, of local guides, and so just if you're kind of curious about how that process works, I certainly encourage you to become a local guide yourself. Contribute a few photos. You can kind of see how it works. But if you go into a place, it'll ask you if you know this place. If you say yes, it will ask you some different questions, and then depending on where you go and what kind of information is needed, the local guides are the primary source for this. So here's an example where it's saying, which photo do you think is more helpful? It's using the local guides as human filters, right? To look at things and say, hey, which one of these things would be a better photo to use for this listing, right? That's not the owner picking that. Those are that's the machine itself going out to the local guides and saying, which things should I use to highlight for this business? And then they'll ask things like, is this the right phone number, to try to confirm that. Sometimes they'll get suggestions that a phone number is different, and then they'll put that out into the local guides community to try to get answers to that. So there's quite a lot of that is happening, and a lot of that information that's coming into your business listing is from your own customers and people who are visiting your place of business. These are all things that can be contributed right now. This has expanded over the last couple of years. We went from photos to videos and answers and all kinds of different things. We do have quite a large section in the workshop, so I encourage you to attend one of those where we talk about some of these individual things, questions and answers in particular, but also photos and videos and some of the other stuff. So reviews, ratings, photos, videos, 360s, edits, places, facts, questions and answers, all of those things are part of the Local Guides program itself. If you're curious about where the information, where something came from, if you look at your own business listing, you can look in your photo gallery, and up in the upper left-hand corner there, it will have an attribution block, and it says this is the local guide who provided this photo. And you can click on that person's name, and then you can see all of the things that they have contributed. And this one, just as an example, so this guy submitted 205 photos and has 15 million views on those 200 photos. So there's really quite a lot of exposure just for the Local Guides contribution. They get used quite a lot in all of these different products. So you can kind of get a sense whether this is someone local or someone who is just passing through. And if it is someone local and it is a good image and you feel like it's helping out your business, then maybe it's an opportunity to, if you see that person come into the store, you recognize them to say thank you for helping to increase your exposure, the exposure for your business. If you do want to contribute, this is where you do that in your Maps app. You just go to the little hamburger menu there and you go to your contributions, and then you can add your photos. Definitely encourage you to do that just so that you've got a good idea what people are doing, why they might be doing that in your place of business, and kind of how that whole process works if you don't do it already. Okay, so those are the 3 reasons that this is really important to your business. And now we're going to do a real high level kind of checklist for things that you want to make sure that you have done. And again, the workshop goes into quite a bit more detail on best practices and how to do certain things. But this is the top level stuff. You want to make sure that you tick these boxes before you do anything else. You got to make sure that you tick these boxes. So the first one is to make sure that you've claimed your business. And you can do that by searching your business and then look at the knowledge panel from your business. And if you see this little icon, the shield there, and it says claim this business or own this business, sometimes the wording is a little bit different, then your business is unverified. And that means that you don't necessarily have control over all of the things that we're going to look at in the workshop, and even that we look at today, because you haven't proved that you are the owner of that business. It used to be the only way to do that was to get a postcard, add an address, which sometimes can be problematic. There are many other ways to do that now. St. Pete Clearwater actually will have the ability to do instant verification at the workshop. So if you do find yourself in a position where you are not verified and you maybe had problems with it in the past, I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. There's some paperwork that you can bring along and we can help you get instantly verified at one of those workshops. Okay, so that's the first one. Make sure you're verified. Pretty simple. Next one is just to make sure that you access your Google My Business dashboard at least once a month. There's a lot of really important information in there, and as I mentioned, there's a lot of changes that happen inside these products. Definitely worth paying attention to. Tons of different ways to get to that. You can go to business.google.com and you can go to the sign in or the manage now button up there. If you're already logged in, you can search for your own business name in your knowledge panel, and then usually in the search, the SERP there, the search engine result page, has a big block that says, hey, you should add information. If you are signed up for Google My Business and you're verified, you probably also get a bunch of different emails all the time about things that have been added to your listing. And again, we have a much more in-depth section about that in the workshop if you're able to attend that. Okay, next one is just to make sure that your basic information is complete and up to date. And that's really just business name, categories. And remember, you can add multiple categories. So you want to make sure that you have a primary category that best represents your business, because that's going to be the key source when people are searching for non-branded traffic, if you will, right? Searching for a business type. So category is very important, but if you feel like you don't necessarily fit into that category, you have others, then you can add subcategories to your listing. And as far as I know, there isn't really a limit for that. So you can go in and add a few additional categories there to give yourself a little bit more coverage. Address, phone numbers, including international phone numbers, website or websites, and particularly when we get into restaurant listings, there's quite a lot of other websites as online ordering and menus and other kinds of websites that you can put in there. Hours, critically important, and description, which is a thing that has come and gone over the last couple of years, but is back currently. So you can make sure that your business description is up to date. And that's just all in Google My Business in the info tab, and you can go in and make sure that you've got all of that stuff up to date. That's basically the complete listing. If you have all of that stuff, then your listing is considered complete. Certainly not the only thing that you can do in there, but you want to make sure that you've got those boxes ticked. One thing to pay special attention to is hours. And you should be getting, if you are logged into GMB, to Google My Business, and you're verified, you should be getting notifications when a holiday is coming up that you need to update your hours. You definitely want to pay attention to that, because if you don't do that, if you don't go in and update your hours for whatever the holiday is, then Google isn't too clear about whether or not you're open, and they will warn people about that, right? They'll say hours may be different because of this holiday, and that can be enough to make somebody go somewhere else if they're choosing between two different similar businesses. So hours are critically important and becoming more and more important to this overall platform to make sure that they are correct and that you're keeping them up to date when you have holidays and things like that. So you want to make sure that that's in there. This is one example of the reasons for that, is that hours are now displayed as quick answers and as spoken responses from Google Assistant. So this isn't even showing your knowledge panel. In some cases, it'll show your knowledge panel on the right-hand side, but you don't even have to go to that, right? What time does XYZ open? And it will tell you right in the quick answers at the top of the page. Those, interestingly, those exposures are now counted in your Insights tab of GMB. And that's we'll get to in a second, because there's some really important information that is available through Insights. Next one that you want to do is make sure that you check your photos. And here's an example. This was a cover photo for a hotel. It's not quite as bad as it seems. The hotel was being renovated at the time, but they clearly weren't paying attention to what was going on with their GMB listing, because I'm pretty sure that's not the photo that they had in mind for the cover for that hotel. So make sure that you check your photos. Make sure you know what's going on in there. You don't want to be surprised by something like this. Okay. The Photos tab, and again, we have some best practices and some suggestions about what kinds of things the algorithm likes or that the humans like, but just very simply, you want to go to Photos. You can take a look at your own photos, so that's the By Owner tab there, and this just illustrating kind of the difference between what gets submitted by an owner and what gets submitted by the consumers. So you have 24 images that were submitted by the owner, and compared to 148 images that were submitted by consumers, by customers. So there's a big difference there. You're always going to have an overwhelmingly more higher number of photos that are submitted by your own customers than what you submit into the platform. So it definitely makes sense to take a look at that. Remember that listings with quality photos are twice as likely to generate engagement with customers. This is another number that is from Google's own research, where they look at how people use the knowledge panels and use the GMB information. So definitely worth paying attention to. Making sure that your photos are in there. You can report photos that are inaccurate or irrelevant. There's a section about that in the workshop that goes into more detail about how you do that and what the best way to do that is. So if you have photos that don't match in there, it's a really common question. That is a great way to get rid of those. And this just sort of illustrating that. So this is from Puerto Rico. You know, which beach would you want to visit? And looking at the cover photo there of some of the destruction from the hurricane versus what that photo looks like now, or what that beach looks like now, definitely worth updating that information. As you can guess, probably a lot more people are going to go looking at that new photo than we're looking at the old one. Okay, next up is to check Insights to get a better understanding of how customers see your business, and this is why you should really be doing this once a month. Every time you look at your website analytics, which you do look at once a month, right? You should also be looking at this, because you're going to get a bunch of information in here that you just can't get through any other analytics package. This is all stuff that's happening inside Google's ecosystem. So just as an example, up at the top here, we have total searches, and you can do up to a quarter there. There is a mechanism to do a longer period of time, which is in the workshop, but not in this. So you can go into the full quarter there. You see how many searches. It splits it up by direct and discovery. So discovery would be like the category searches, the business type, somebody searching for something like that, versus the green, where that's the number of times somebody knew the name of your business or was typing it in that way. There's also, oops, sorry about the flipping around there. There's also then some information that we looked at earlier about the expanding that beyond just search. And granted, this is just maps and search, not looking at a bunch of the other products that we just looked at. But you can see there's a pretty substantial increase there. So this happens to be a hotel, but during that quarter, that was almost 2 million views with search and maps combined. So a lot of exposure. there, which again are numbers you're not going to get anywhere else. So lots more stuff, really interesting stuff coming into insights that we'll dive into in the workshop. And then next step is to respond to reviews from customers. This again becoming increasingly important. The rating for your business in Maps and the quality of the reviews that are on Google itself becoming increasingly important to how you are exposed inside all of these different products. So definitely worth paying attention to. You don't necessarily have to respond to everything, but you should definitely have on your radar maybe once a month to go in, take a look at what the reviews are, and just try to get a handle on what's going on there and see if there are places that you can reply to those. So just a simple example there where you can post a reply. And then lastly, in terms of the checkboxes, is the Posts program. And Posts is a program that started in, I think, towards the end of 17, but it allows you to put this really sort of large block, very visual block inside your knowledge panel. It's one of the only places inside this whole ecosystem where you can capture that much real estate, and it's free. You can also put your own tracking codes in there, which is another one of the places that you can, probably the only place you can do that for free, right? You can do that with pay-per-click, but you got to pay. So Posts, if you're not doing Posts right now, huge opportunity for your business. You just go into to your Google My Business dashboard. You can go into Posts and you throw in a photo and some text. We have some best practices for that, which are in that workshop. But basically, you put in a photo, you put in some information as a business owner or manager. So for your business, you can also put like offers. You can put 10% off or come in and get 15%. You can put all kinds of other things into those posts. So you have quite a lot of flexibility there. You can do multiple posts. We generally recommend that you do at least one, and if you're going to do more, just do two, because that takes up the most amount of real estate there. This is what the posts look like in your knowledge panel. So you got the knowledge panel on the right-hand side, and then you have the example, this one being an event. But as you can see, quite a lot of real estate on the page that you're getting for free. So if you're not doing posts already, that is a great opportunity. And then inside the platform, there are a bunch of different examples of how you might go about doing that. So this one is like a coupon approach, but there's lots of other examples that you can take a look at. So there you go. There's your quick checklist before we move on to talking about the in-person workshops, dates and times, but I'll stay on this just for a second. Some of these real high level, right? Make sure that you claimed your business if you haven't already. Make sure that you have a plan to access this information at least once a month, if not more. Make sure that your basic information is all complete and that you keep it up to date, including the hours. Make sure to check your photos. You got to know what's going on in there. You don't want to be surprised by one of the photos like that one that we saw for the hotel. Check your insights. Lots of really interesting information in there. Make sure you're paying attention to reviews and make sure that you're posting. The posts only last about 7 days, so you want to make sure that you're doing that once a week to keep that up to date. Okay, so we do have, as Leroy mentioned, there will be some workshops that are coming up. I'll show you the dates when we get to the end of this. Just a couple of more slides here, so if you do have questions, this is a great time to start typing them into the right-hand side. There's a questions box there. And looks like we'll have a few minutes at the end here to go through some of those questions. Stuff that's in the workshop, obtaining and responding to reviews, some more tactical training on specific things you can do, tips about photography, how to add 360 images and virtual tours, questions and answers. That's actually a really important one that is in there. There's a whole section on questions and answers. We have some different opportunities by business type. You may have noticed in there, there's different kinds of things for restaurants than there are for hotels, than there are for museums and so forth. So there's some special opportunities for different business types in there. And then, as I mentioned, there's an opportunity for instant verification if you have had verification problems or if you're not verified already. If you do want to do that at one of these workshops, you will need to bring some paperwork with you. That is typically a utility bill. There's a couple other things that are listed there that can be used, but it's almost always a utility bill that's got your name and the name of your business on it. And that just lets us know that you are the owner of the business so that we can go ahead and do that instant verification using the app that St. Pete Clearwater has available to them as part of that DMO partnership program. So if you do need to do that, just remember to bring that with you. And then here are the dates for those upcoming workshops, as Leroy mentioned, on the 12th and the 13th. And there are 3 different times on each of those days. You only need to come to one of those. So quite a lot of opportunities to fit your schedule for those workshops. So I'm going to click once more here. We'll retain those times and dates so that you can screenshot those or write those down. Probably be some more opportunities for you to get information about that as we go. But now is a great time to ask questions and answer questions. So remember that panel on the right-hand side, and let's go take a look at what we have in there. First question is, does this replace Google+? That is a great question. A lot of the components of Google My Business were pulled out of what used to be the Google+ Places page. The whole Google+ ecosystem is pretty well defunct at this point. It was already on the chopping block, and then there were a couple of months ago, there were some security breach issues that accelerated that end of life for that product. So Google+ is no more, and the whole Places part of that was about managing your business has morphed into Google My Business. So all of the things that were once there are now housed in GMB, although most of them have been replaced by newer versions of all of those components. So in a way, yes, it supersedes all of the stuff that you were doing with Google+, but if you were doing that before, it should have retained at least your basic information as it pulled it over. Okay. Next question then is to please show the checklist again. So I'm going to go back here. Let's go back to the checklist so that we can take a look at that. And then I will go forward again to the dates so that we kind of stay on the dates at the end there. So I'll leave this here while we answer the next question. And the next question is, how beneficial is Google Virtual Tour for restaurants? Also a great question. There has been an increasing effort on Google's part to drive 360 content, and that's coming from a bunch of different angles. So there is a whole new run of hardware that came out really at the end of 17, although a lot of it wasn't commercially available until the beginning of 18, so about a year ago. That hardware, the 360 hardware, some of it, consumer grade stuff that attaches to your phone, like $300-400 stuff, drastically better than the equipment that was thousands and thousands of dollars that was being used prior to, earlier in 2017 and before. So part of it is there's a big effort on the Street View team to drive that user-generated content with these new cameras. And one of the effects of that is that we see a lot more of the Street View being preferenced. You may have noticed in your knowledge panel that there is sometimes there'll be a little see inside, or there'll be an outside view that is Street View that is featured inside your knowledge panel. So there's a lot of effort that's going into that, but that isn't necessarily answering your question, which is how beneficial is it? I think because of the attention that Street View is getting and will continue to get, and there's other places it appears like Daydream or the Oculus Go, if you've played with any of those are kind of, the Street View stuff's kind of already ready for that stuff. I see a lot more people relying on those Street View images to make a decision about whether they're going to go somewhere. It's one thing to have pictures of the outside of a building or to see products on a shelf. It's a different thing to use that 360 and actually be able to look around. And I'll give you one example from my own personal experience, which is if I'm going to go to, I was looking for some outdoor gear, and there was a store. There were a couple of different stores that were nearby me. I was traveling somewhere, and I didn't know what the stores were. The names looked the same. They all have some name, Mountain, something Mountain. And so I didn't really have a sense of what the difference was between the two, but I wanted to see what was inside, and one of them had 360s and one of them didn't. And I used that 360 image to kind of take a look around and see whether the products I was interested in are inside that business. Now, for a restaurant, is that exactly the same thing? Probably not. But giving people a sense of what the interior looks like, what the ambiance looks like, how big is it, how many tables, if there is a wait, like am I going to be waiting a long time if there's only 3 or 4 tables, is it a larger place, is it kind of a commercial place? Those are all questions that can be answered with a simple 360. And you can take your own 360s, you can user generate your own 360s with a $300 or $400 camera. You can buy them on Amazon, or you can rent a better quality camera, or there's a bunch of people in your area that will come and take those photos for you as well for relatively low cost. So I think I think that the virtual tours are increasingly important to individual businesses, and restaurants would obviously be included in that. All right, let me go back forward to the dates for the upcoming workshops here, just in case we need to get those recorded. And any other questions from anybody or anything you would like to add, Leroy?
Yeah, CA, I've got a question. I mean, I think when people talk about digital marketing, you know, traditionally just people default to social media. They default to Facebook, and that's where they begin. And they, I think, oftentimes forget about, you know, kind of the obvious behemoth in the room, that being Google. You talked about kind of spending time in the back end insights area once a month. I mean, talk about the balance between the two, and some of the maybe objectives you're trying to accomplish with Google versus Facebook, because I think you know a lot of people view them maybe entangled a little bit, but very, very different platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do see a lot of that. I mean, I see a lot of people who will pay attention to their website, who will pay attention to Facebook or Instagram or whatever kind of social channels that they are using. And those are all important platforms, right? Like those are engaged consumers. Those are people who care about your brand, who know the name of your business, who are willing to engage on that level. So they're much more valuable people who are there. But the number of eyeballs that you're talking about is typically going to be way, way larger when we look at the Google ecosystem itself. So, you know, I hesitate to say to people, because there just isn't that much to do inside the Google, you know, platform compared to your own website. Okay. But if you're, you know, as I said at the beginning, if you're going to spend an hour looking at your website and trying to make sure that you're doing the right things there, you owe it to yourself to at least be spending that hour looking at these platforms, the Google products, and making sure that you're taking advantage of everything that you can do in there. And as you saw here, there's really quite a lot of stuff. Like if you're not doing posts, that's my number one recommendation is you're not doing posts now, start doing the posts now, because you'll get thousands of views on that. And they're not the same engagement that you might get with a similar post on Facebook, particularly if you're going to go in and pay, right, for a promoted post. But they're free, and they're way more eyeballs, even if the engagement level is lower. And that's certainly what we found when we compared various social channels to what was going on in Google. So, you know, I mean, I hate to make like a breakdown that says you should do the percentage. I just like to say, if you're going to do an hour here, do an hour there, right? And at least make sure that you've covered your bases in Google's platforms, just purely because of the volume. And as I mentioned in a couple places in here, like the Hotel Finder, like these products are evolving so rapidly that what you know, what you saw a couple of months ago or a couple of weeks ago even can be very different than what is happening today. You know, there's a lot of effort that is going into Google pushing into travel and different various travel products. This is a great question, follow up to that, which is, can they be the same content as social? And absolutely. If you're going to go in and post something in you know, Facebook or somewhere else, you can just take that same thing, copy paste it, put it into your Google My Business listing. There are some differences in the length of stuff and the size of the photos, but they're pretty minor. You know, most of the time you should be able to apply that pretty easily to one or the other, and there's certainly no penalty for doing that and having them exist in those separate platforms. Part of it, I think, is kind of balancing the people who know you and that you have a relationship with, which is largely what, you know, Facebook and some of the other social channels are meant to be, and people who don't know you yet, and that's really what we're talking about when we're looking at these Google My Business tools.
That's a great point, CA. I think really, and that's where Google can really benefit from a free perspective, right? I mean, obviously you can put dollars there for the same as Facebook. When you talk about leveraging your business and your product without cost, you know, Facebook, that's going to be a really big challenge. I mean, organic reach on Facebook, you know, it doesn't really exist. So when you talk about discovery and reaching those people who don't know you, I mean, Google and all of the tools there, the free tools are where it's at. Thank you for that, CA. And I can't emphasize the in-person workshops enough. I think this is the tip of the iceberg, and we'll continue to dive deep in with that. Greatly appreciate your insight and your time.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.